So this is the third part of the True Church Rising, which is perhaps one of the most significant series that we've done here as a church. We're taking all of these different puzzle pieces that God has dropped. God's into puzzles, He's into parables, He's into mystery, and He leads us along on a journey. And we've been on a journey as Journey Church in collecting some puzzle pieces of what God is speaking and saying to us, but all of it's coming together to form a beautiful image of what is in the Father's heart for this region. Do you know God has a dream for this region, for this community? Do you know God Himself, the creator of heaven and earth, has a dream for the Northeast, for Passaic County? He does. He has a dream in His heart, and we are His co-laborers who get to tune into His heart because we're one with Him. And then He gets to paint this picture of His dream through us, through our lives. So I hope you've been tracking with us, because the last 2 weeks were incredibly foundational, okay? It's all on YouTube, you know. We want to keep it up there for you to go back to, listen to it again. The last 2 weeks, we talked about, we really asked a question. We asked, what is the church? Okay, before talking about vision and change and strategy, we need to answer that question. And so we've discovered an answer, at least part of an answer, that's absolutely breathtaking. And that is the foundation we're building upon today. So let me do a quick recap here. We've been painting this analogy, this picture, this puzzle piece of a particular flower, and using this flower to speak to what the church is about. Okay, Jesus would often do that. He would point to the flowers of the field, to different things, seed and agriculture, and He would give amazing revelation of the kingdom. So in the simple things of life, there is hidden the glory of God. So very simple flower. What is the flower? All right, good. You answered the first question correct. We can move forward. Yeah. So I shared how God spoke this word sunflower to me 6 years ago, and I've been on that journey of really understanding what it means. But I knew from the beginning that it had something to do with the church. And it wasn't really until this month that it all began to come together in my own heart, and I think that's because this isn't about me. I'm just one ear on the body, you know? Just an ear is meaningless without the rest of the body, right? So I'm just hearing some stuff and relaying some things. But I think since we're talking about this together, God's been shining a light on what this has meant. And so the image of a sunflower has helped us to arrive at what is church? What is the essence of church? Beyond all the streams of Christianity, beyond all the different branches we talked about, all the branches, and really honoring those branches and understanding, seeing God's glory in these different branches of Christianity, coming down to the bare essentials. And so this is more than just a nice little sermon analogy, okay? This is way more than that. This is something that Jesus Himself is speaking. He's sharing His heart with us, and He's revealing truth to us. And, I can't convince you of that personally. All I can do is point you to the Holy Spirit and ask that you go to Him and commune with Him and ask Him to confirm these things in your heart. And He's already been doing that with people. It's been cool. Just people sending me pictures of sunflowers that they took before I even started this series, and different cool things that God was speaking to people in different ways. So He's already confirming it. But if you haven't felt confirmation, if you feel disconnected from the things I'm talking to, go to God. Go to Him and ask Him, Lord, just reveal these truths to me personally. I don't want to just be a fan in the seat. I don't want to just be a spectator. All right? I want to participate in what's going on. Okay? So go to Him and ask Him for your own confirmation, your own depth of revelation into these things. So, does anyone remember what type of flower a sunflower is? What's that terminology? Somebody said it. Composite flower. We can keep going. All right. Composite flower. Yes. Meaning a sunflower is not one flower. I just found this out when going into this. A sunflower is actually a bunch of flowers, individual flowers called ray petals, like the rays of the sun, that actually come together to form one flower head that looks like the sun that it faces. So these flowers, of course, are known for following the sun through the day, from its rising and from its setting and back to its rising again, until they mature and eventually become established facing the east, which is beautiful, the direction of the sunrise. And so that all speaks to us of the church. This is the he who has ears to hear, let him hear moment, all right? First and foremost, church is a community. It's individuals, rays of the sun. We come from him, the Father of lights. Individuals coming together who are focused on one thing: the rising and the setting of the Son of God. In other words, the death and the resurrection of Jesus, which is a living reality that we tap into every day. And that speaks to our true identity because we're made in his image. We come from the Son. We all of us. So this goes for every human being. And I said this the first week, I'll repeat it again now. The whole world is a hidden church. The whole world is the church in a hidden way, awaiting the truth to cause them to blossom, to cause them to open up, because the image, the form, the shape, the DNA of Christ, of God, is already there, already ready to just blossom. It's just some are opened and some are not opened. Okay, so that's just a simple definition. Here's part of the long-term vision for us, okay? I'm going to get into a couple practical things right now. We did something this morning called the House of Wine. We meet a little earlier. It's a smaller group. Everybody's welcome, but we come and we just have more of an open time of worship, but it's all based around the communion elements. And we just set our hearts like a sunflower looking at the rising and setting of Jesus, and we just feast on that together, and we come together and we minister to one another, and there's a lot of participation that happens, so it's more intimate. Now, I want to say that what we do in the mornings is actually a better picture of church than what we do right now, what we're doing right at this moment at 10:30. What we're doing here is incredibly strategic and important, but when it comes to the essence of church, we're not tapping into it as much at this time. Now, part of the reason for that, again, is because of the intimacy in a smaller group coming together and the freedom for the Spirit of God to do what he wants. I mean, we want to have that freedom now in this 10:30 time, but it's just harder when you have different things you need to talk about. There's life that's happening, there's meetings, there's announcements, there's stuff that's going on. Again, this is a strategic time, but I feel like in the future, these larger gatherings are not going to be known as church. They'll be called other things, like strategic get-togethers or something. I don't know. The point isn't the language or the details right now. God will work out the details through us, and it's probably different everywhere you go. The point is that we need to get more and more to the essence of the church. And so that's what the House of Wine is about. And I'm not saying that it's the perfect essence, but because it has that participation element, that worship element, that focus on the cross, it gets at it more. So here's the plan, okay? Here's what we're feeling. Eventually, we want to have House of Wine gatherings happening 24/7, okay? Because of all the people that are going to be waking up to their identity, all right? They're going to be needing a place to go. And they're not all going to want to come to a place at 9:30 in the morning on a Sunday, all right? We got to get over ourselves, all right? We got to get over needing the whole world to come on our schedule, on our timetable, and actually go to them. Okay? That's how St. Patrick revolutionized Western civilization. St. Patrick left the confines of the traditional church structure, and he went to the people. He lived with them, and he did church on their terms, his message on his terms, on God's terms, but church on their terms. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, read about St. Patty sometime. Go ahead. Really powerful stuff. You know he resurrected the dead too? St. Patrick raised people from the dead. Okay, that's another sermon. St. Patrick, yeah. So we need to go to the people. Our message doesn't change, but we need to learn to adapt and to get into the culture. And so we see houses of wine happening all throughout the week. House of wine gatherings that are going to happen. They could happen in homes. They could happen here, round the clock. Who knows? But I'm telling you, this is going to impact this generation a lot more than what we're doing right now, because this is the ADD generation. And you know what? That's not all a bad thing. That's really not all a bad thing, okay? Because this generation is made for participation. This generation is made to get their hands dirty. They're not made to just sit in a seat all day and be told what to do. That's why our education system is failing. And the education system and the modern American church are both going like this because we keep trying to spin the same wheel over and over again. But it's not working. Okay, so we need to adapt, we need to change the way that we think of church, and that is going to involve more participation, more freedom, and different times of the week. And less structure. Wow. So that's part of what we're seeing, is houses of wine. We don't have to call it that. The idea of the wine is the cross, is the new covenant. But we see these gatherings happening. It's almost like a house of prayer. You know, houses of prayer have these sets that go on 24/7, similar to that, but all focused on that joy of the gospel. Okay? So these things we see picking up over and over again, and I'll call it a sunflower movement. It could be groups of 10 who meet on a Wednesday night somewhere. It could be a larger body like this. There's no limit, okay? I don't want to put any limitations on this. As long as the focus, here's the limit. The limit to this is the limitless one, okay? The limit to, the boundaries to this whole thing is focus on Jesus and union with Christ. That's what they're going to be focused on, and intimacy and family, okay? Is this making sense? All right. Come on. So remember, last week, we also talked about cross-pollination, right? We're also going to have cross-pollination between different churches, different gatherings, people that will mix pollen with one another, right? And so that's going to be a big part of this too, is some of them will be relational, like just informal connections with other churches. Other things will be more official networks. I don't know. But there's going to be more and more connection with other churches, and we're going to share the pollen of this house of wine, this gospel, with other churches. And we're going to get some pollen from them as well, because we have things to learn from others as well. Amen? Yeah. We do not have all the answers. Okay? If I'm just an ear, and you guys are the other parts of this body, then this body is like just an ear with the other churches being a part of the larger body. You know, it just gets bigger and bigger. So we're just one piece of this. Okay. So anyway, all right, that's the vision. It's people all over, different kinds of settings, coming together around the table. Around the table. We talked about that the first week. Table versus temple. The temple is decreasing and the table is rising. Table Christianity, fellowship, family Christianity. Okay. Selah. Here's where I want to go today. Well, first, is this making sense? Okay, can you kind of envision this a little bit? I know I'm painting really broad strokes, but can you see a little bit of what we're getting at here? This has happened before, and it's going to happen again at a larger scale. All right. Okay, here's how we're going to spend the rest of our time together. Oh boy. I want to ask another question. We started with what is the church? We arrived at somewhat of an answer to that with this image of a sunflower. But now the question is, how do we get there? In other words, how do you get that field going? So I think the natural answer is obvious. You plant seeds. Okay? And so today, I want to spend the rest of our time talking about a seed planting strategy. We'll get to that I believe is from the Lord. I believe it's something that God has given us. Ultimately, the work is on His shoulders. Okay? This is all a work of His grace. Everything we're talking about is all a work of His grace. It's in His sovereign plan. He's going to do it. But guess what? We're His shoulders. We are His body. You're one with God. So He's going to be doing this work through you by His grace. Right? So if we just keep doing the same thing over and over again, just playing church or whatever, we're not going to see this fully happen because we are a part of this. We are His body. But He gives us grace to step into this. It's like wind in your sails. You got to raise the sails. You got to be open. But the wind comes when you're like that. So this right here this morning is going to be the most tangible part of this series. And it's something that we're going to be talking about a lot, and we're going to be meeting about, and we're going to be writing about, and we're going to be going over and over again, probably for years to come. So we'll reinforce this again and again, but it's really important to pay attention right now because this is really the first time we're talking about this. We did over our Passover dinner. We had a dinner together around the table back in March. I'm going to reiterate some things from that, but go a little bit deeper. I also want to say, too, to our beloved friends over there, Roland and Jackie, this is actually amazing and bittersweet, both, that this is your last kind of official Sunday with us. Because, if I could just go here for a second, Roland and Jackie represent so much here to us as a church. They've been leaders in the church for years, pastors in the church, but really more than that, they've been mother and father in this church in many ways. They've been a mother and a father in this house. And so today, you know, with them leaving, we're gonna talk about them a little bit later more. But with them leaving, I feel like it is a maturing time for us because they have sowed so much into us. And it's kind of like when the kids leave the house, so to speak, although in this case it's like the parents leaving the house. But that's the time, that's the time for kids to grow wings, right? Start standing on your own, all that kind of stuff. Can't lean on mom and dad. So, I'm not putting that all on them, but it's what they speak to. It's what they've embodied. And so this is significant. Just want to add to that what we're going to share now is significant, the timing of all of this, because this really does mark a new beginning for us as a church. Okay, you're going to get the trajectory of where we're headed now for years to come in the essence of this message, okay? So, I want to talk about the royal sunflower seed, the seed that will spark a movement. So, back in March, some of you have heard this story before, at the Passover. It was a little bit before the Passover that we had here, the dinner. We had Bill Vanderbush here, and we had a special Saturday morning session. Who was here for Bill Vanderbush when he came to the conference? A few of you got it. It was amazing. So we had a special Saturday session. Not everybody was at. It was just for leaders in the church. And that morning, I woke up in my bed, and thank God I was in my bed when I woke up. I woke up, and I heard the word, the royal sunflower seed. The words, the royal sunflower seed. And now, I wasn't dreaming, and I wasn't thinking of gardens and monarchies, okay? It was just, boom, the royal sunflower seed. I woke up. And immediately I knew it was significant because you all know by now, if you've tracked through this message, that the sunflower image has been important to me. But it wasn't like I was thinking about it at all for a while. I mean, this is something 6 years prior, 5.5 years prior at that point. So I knew it was something God was speaking, and I knew it had to do with the church, but I didn't know what it was all about. So I just kind of file it to the side in my head, and I get going with my day. And I get to church, and I'm the first one there. It was that Saturday morning. It was March 25th. And I pull into the parking lot, and I see this fleece scarf on the ground. And later we found out, I believe it belonged to you, Lorraine. It was your scarf. And this fleece scarf had been lying on the ground all night. Now, because we had the Friday night session the night before. So I go to pick up the fleece scarf, and I notice something strange. The ground everywhere was wet. And you know how muddy our parking lot gets, right? After rain, how wet the parking lot is. It had been raining during the night, and it continued that morning. I think it was still drizzling. It was at least misty by the time I got to the church. But either way, things were wet. But when I go to pick up the fleece, the first thing I notice is that it was dry. Okay? The fleece itself was dry, while the ground all around it was covered, and under it was covered in moisture. And I knew nobody had just dropped it there because I was the first one there, and I knew we had a conference the night before. So immediately I knew that God was speaking about the story of Gideon. All right, for those of you who know the story of Gideon, Judges chapter 6, 7, 8, that's where it is. Gideon was given a strategy from God. Okay, he was given a vision of something much bigger than himself. And Gideon was a nervous guy. He was unbelieving, didn't know who he was. Sounds familiar. I think we can all relate. I'm preaching to myself right now. And so there's this famous story of God breaking through that and speaking to him and giving him some encouragement along the way. And it involved him throwing out a fleece. Anybody remember this story? Gideon's fleece? Right? It's even a phrase that we use in modern culture. I threw out a fleece, you know? It comes from the Bible. And he threw out a fleece, and in the morning, the ground was all wet, and the fleece was dry. And then it gets reversed. The fleece is wet, and the ground is dry, and he takes that as a sign to move forward. And that is one of several signs that God gave Gideon to move forward with this strategy. So I was blown away by this, not just because of the fleece scarf, because I could still overanalyze reasons why it was dry. My mind can still go into places of doubt with that. I was blown away by this because I had just recently been thinking about Gideon and that story. Okay? So even if you have an explanation for why the fleece was dry on the wet ground, the fact that I had been meditating on that very story recently and asking God for strategy and vision, just beyond coincidence. There's a certain point where my analytical mind has to catch up and say, get with the picture, son. Let's get moving here because this is God. So, now this is cool. Bill's teaching that morning when he spoke to us was about unity, and it was about connecting with other churches all around this message of the finished work of the cross, which we're going to get into with this royal sunflower seed. So again, that was this key thread running through all of this. So I get done with that meeting. I go upstairs, my office up there, and I sit on my chair, and I'm just like, God, you need to speak. You need to speak. You need to speak to my heart. You need to speak to other people's hearts. I don't want to be the only one carrying this thing. You need to speak to us because you're obviously saying something. You're trying to get our attention. What is it? And God began to unfold a strategy. And some of it was shared on Passover, but I want to give more of a full picture right now. And I want to say this as I share this with you, that I'm handing you all right now in this moment, it's not physical, but I'm handing you a pearl right now. All right? If somebody was to give you a physical pearl in this moment, all right, like an expensive big one, you wouldn't just throw it in your pocketbook and forget about it for a few days. You wouldn't. You would take it, you'd put it in a safe place, and when you got home, you would take it out of that safe place, and you'd put it in another safe place until you were ready to do something with it. Right? You would handle that pearl with care. So I'm releasing a pearl to you, and I'm asking that you handle it with care and with prayer. Can we just open to that? Thank you, Jesus. Holy Spirit. Thank you, Lord. So, in the story of Gideon, he and the people, I got to give you some more context, okay? He and the people were faced with an overwhelming army, the Midianites, okay? This army from the land of Midian, who were tearing the land apart, enslaving the people, and even killing the people of Israel. And God basically said to Gideon, I'm going to give you this wild strategy to overcome this entire army. Now, this army was overwhelming. It says that it literally spanned the whole landscape. It can't count. You couldn't count the amount of people in the army. And the Bible gives pretty big numbers for some armies. So this was a huge army. But let me say this. It was not unlike the armies that we face today. When we look at our landscape, when we turn on the news, when we read the paper, and we see the armies of drug addiction, we see the armies of the drums of war, we see the armies of suicide, depression, and sickness, all of that, okay? We got the same thing going on here. Family breakdown is another one. But like the Midianites, these things are equally conquerable by the strategies of heaven. And have already been defeated. So here's what God gave Gideon, and then I'm going to show you how it relates to us, okay? Gideon has an army of 300, and that had been pared down from a lot of other people, okay? So it's a small army. And he splits this army into 3 divisions, 3 different units. But every person in each unit was given the same equipment. Each person was equipped with something very strange, and yet it would turn out to be very effective. So, everyone was given a trumpet for one hand, really a shofar is the Hebrew word there, is a ram's horn, a trumpet. And with the other hand, they were given this jar of clay, this clay jar that was covering a burning torch inside. And that was it. That was all that they had. No physical weapons. No nukes. I'm sure they wanted one or two. No political power. No billion-dollar war machine. Just a trumpet and this jar of clay with fire inside. Okay, so they break up the 3 divisions. And they all charge this overwhelming army. Now, God had to give another confirmation before that happened. It involved bread tumbling into the camp and a dream somebody had. Anyway, they had more confirmation because they're still afraid. So they charge this army, and all that they did was blow the trumpet and smash the clay jar, to reveal the fire inside. And at that moment, with that simple little act of wild obedience, crazy obedience, counterintuitive obedience, the Spirit of God went to work and uprooted the entire Midianite army. Completely overthrew them. That's it. Judges chapter 7. I'd encourage you to go home and read that, okay? Now, here's how this relates to us beautifully. Each of us are being equipped with something. Everyone here has been, but in a more tangible way in the days ahead, you are going to be equipped with a trumpet and a jar of clay filled with fire for your hands, but in a different way. All right? So first of all, the trumpet. What the trumpet represents, the shofar, in the Bible, always, it's a proclamation of the word of the Lord. Okay? It's a proclamation, it's an announcement of something. That's what a trumpet represents. So what do you think that points to? Praise, but very specific. It's not just songs. It's a proclamation of what? Close. It's actually a proclamation that the battle's already won. It's an announcement of the gospel. It's an announcement of the word of God, the work of Jesus Christ. That's the trumpet. It's just an announcement. It's a proclamation of something that has been finished. Okay? Now, jar of clay. That might be a little bit harder to figure out, a jar of clay with fire. But a good thing about the Bible is that the Bible interprets itself. If you study the scriptures enough, you can determine what these signs all point to. So when you read the New Testament, Paul writes this. He says, but we have this treasure in earthen vessels, or some translations say jars of clay. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us. The jar of clay, right, the earthen vessel, that's even a way to translate back in Judges what it's saying, what was put in their hands. That has to do with human vessels, human beings, because we were formed from the clay of the earth. Literally, we are those earthen vessels. But all of us has a treasure inside. Each one of us has such value, something incalculably precious within. Now, this symbol had fire inside. Now, the fire in the scriptures over and over again, represents God himself, represents the Spirit of God, represents Christ himself. That's the fire. So, these two things, the trumpet and the jar of clay, are two sides of the same coin. We're being equipped, first and foremost, with the gospel of Christ in you, the hope of glory, the announcement of this message of original blessing, which is why we spent so much time talking about that over the summer, and even longer for those who are involved in the recovery program. We are called to go out with the good news of people's true identity, that beyond the earthen vessels is treasure, and to break through the lie of what people believe about themselves and to reveal that truth, that behind the jars of clay is a holy spark. It's the fire of God. There is a treasure, or we're using the terminology, a diamond of our true self that's hidden right in the rough of humanity. From the addict to the businessman to the Muslim to the prodigal, whoever. So let's go back to this here. The royal sunflower seed. God began to unfold a little bit more of what this word was, and it has to do with what we're talking about. That royal seed is the seed of original blessing. It's the seed of this gospel, the finished work of Christ, that Christ actually already dwells in all, everywhere. And it's a proclamation, it's an announcement of this. It's the seed is this fresh understanding of the gospel and the Father's true heart, the true face of God. That's all part of this message. That seed, when planted in people, when trumpeted, it releases the potential for sunflowers to arise. And as people awake to the truth of the gospel, they will then begin to arise into their identity, into community, like a sunflower around that table of friendship and communion. And from there, they will be equipped to go and advance, plant their own seeds, and start new sunflowers everywhere. So hopefully you heard the key terms there, all right, that we've been using in more indirect ways for the past few years. But God is now bringing a lot more clarity to this. So those words are awake, arise, advance. We're using that here as kind of a motto, but it's bigger than a motto. I don't even like using the word motto because it's speaking to something incredibly significant and important to what is on God's heart and how we plant seeds and how we call those fresh flowers to arise and then to go out and multiply. So let me just give you all a little bit more of the practical side of this. Let me give a little bit more tangible picture of how this might play out. Okay, and I do want to be careful here because I don't want to put God in a box, because he's always going to be breaking outside of our boxes. But I do want at least a few things of what we're already doing and where we're headed that you can really latch onto this personally and say, God, what does this mean personally? Awake, arise, advance, this seed of original blessing, Christ in you to the people around me. All right, so first thing with this is that we actually created for lack of a different term that I'd like to use, but we created an evangelism and discipleship curriculum, a 3-part curriculum called Awake, Arise, Advance. And many of you went through it. We had our small groups. We're doing small groups again right now. And each part had a tool in teaching people this whole thing we're explaining, bringing individuals or even whole groups through this journey of awakening to their identity, the good news of what Christ has done for all humanity. That's awake. And then from there, we rise up in that identity as a community around a table. And so that's arise. And arise had to do with church and the essence of church and what it means to gather and all of that. The last part is obviously about going out and doing the same and multiplying. Advance. That's what that is. Very simple. So awake is an 8-part teaching that helps unbelievers and even new believers, or even those who've been in church a long time and maybe need a religious detox. All kinds of people. But awake starts with this idea of original blessing. That's part 1. And it starts with the truth that we were all united to Christ's body at the cross, redeemed to sin, raised to life. It focuses on this triumphant message of the finished work of the cross that transcends all the darkness in this world, this higher reality that we're called again to wake up to. And it's the truth of the treasure that's within everyone. So that's the seed, okay? This is an example of the seed. Awake holds that royal seed that we can then plant in different ways. So seeds come in shells. Now the shell is not where the real life is, but it holds the life, right? They provide a protective container for the life, for it to travel and burrow into the ground, and for that life within to then spark when it's in the right conditions. Okay? So there's shells that God wants to put this seed into. And so one of the first shells that we felt the Lord tell us to put together, in fact, the first shell, was something called Awaken Recovery. So we designed this whole program around that 8-part awake thing. And it's really just based on that trumpet announcement that behind the broken jars of addicts' lives is a treasure, is the precious fire of God, the very pearl of great price that Jesus gave his life for. We're bringing that to people. Now, we're not teaching them verbatim the Awake curriculum. We're modifying it for recovery, and we're meeting people where they're at. And we're not just shoving tons of Bible verses down their throats. It's a shell. It's a way for them to interact with that life. So that's a pioneering effort to bring this strategy of Gideon right into the camp of the enemy. You see how that works? Now what's happening, what will happen, as people wake up to their identity through relationship, through mentors, that's where a lot of you guys come in, and through the meetings, we'll invite them to rise up in community and to come around that table, to come to House of Wine gatherings. And yeah, we'll invite them to 10:30 services as well. But wherever, inviting them into family, inviting them into community. It's not about the times and locations. It's about what happens at the times and locations. So people are going to come out of that, and they're going to begin to find family because we're preaching this message of family, of Christ in us. And that's where healing happens. That's where people rise up. So we have a Arise then as a tool to walk people through. And some of you are going to teach people the Arise curriculum in the future. You're going to sit down with someone and teach it to them. And you might have your own style, your own way, but you're going to have the heart, the kernel of that message, to sit down with another human being and walk through them with it and watch them blossom. And then as that happens, as community grows, whether it's here or on other nights of the week, then we're going to have other things called Advance, where we use the Advance curriculum to teach people to step out in their gifts and really to go out and advance that message of love and original blessing to the world around them. So we start the whole cycle over and over again. And we just create this whole sunflower movement. People encountering their identity, encountering family, coming into that, and then being equipped to advance it. Person to person, table to table. This is not a big evangelization, mobilization crusade that we're looking at doing. Okay? There's a place for that stuff, but this is something that's going to be very relational. This is you meeting flesh and blood, one-on-one, with people, engaging with them. That's Christianity. If you think this is Christianity, coming and sitting in a seat and listening to me, you're missing a whole big part of it. Okay? This is discipleship. It's you engaging with people, stepping out of your comfort zone, engaging the lost and the broken with the gospel. And I don't mean having to shove it down their throat. I don't mean we're going to go knock on people's doors and hand out awake tracts. Okay? Hey, maybe the Holy Spirit can do that if he wants to with someone. Be open to the Lord. I'm talking about creative ways, creative shells, where this is going to transpire. Now, besides things like awaken recovery, there could be things like awaken parenting, awaken marriages. All right? The possibilities are endless as far as what we could offer as a community here and in other locations. But the point is, and it doesn't even have to be called awaken, okay? I'm getting at the heart of the message here. The point is what the Awake curriculum points to, is that in those things, there will be reminders for people, avenues for people to learn who they are. There could be a health and wellness outreach that starts. And in that is this message of awake, woven into that, okay? So I just want to throw that out there. I want you to dream about this. But again, this goes beyond just programs and outreaches. Really the biggest shell is your life. That's the biggest shell that burrows into other lives, right? That awakens the gospel. So a lot of this is just going to happen one-on-one. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to publish Awake, Arise, Advance. We're going to put it into a book. Manny Rhinesmith's been designing some great stuff for it. And I've been working with him and others on getting some publishing stuff going. And we want to put it into your hands. We want to put this trumpet, this jar of clay, into your hands so you can read it and dream with God as far as how can I bring this truth in the world? How can I live this truth in the world? Okay? So there's a whole lot more, but we're running out of time here. And I think I'm going to close it up, because what we're going to do next week for the men that are coming out to the men's retreat, you need to be there, okay? Come out, men, to the retreat, because we're going to go deeper into this message, and we're going to work on it practically. And then for those who are staying behind, for guys who absolutely can't make it, and for the ladies staying behind, Kathy's going to be speaking next week, and she's going to be giving the same message as me, but in a different location. So we're all going to be in sync together next Sunday, okay? So come out, and then on the following 2 weeks, there's another element to all of this, and I have some announcements about 2018 that we're going to get to, but this is the focus right now, Awake, Arise, Advance, and I want you to really wrestle with this and go to the Lord with this. Okay. Now, before I call Roland and Jackie to come up, I have to share one last thing with you guys that's incredible, and it'll dovetail right into to the Bowers coming and us just hearing from them a little bit and praying. This was another Gideon confirmation. You guys doing okay? Can we keep talking for a few minutes here? Something that happened this week. It's just, I don't know, maybe God really sees how nervous and insecure I can get, so he just keeps giving crazy signs. I don't know. But I was just asking God, speak to me about this this message on Sunday. God, show me what's on your heart. And I'd already had a sense that it was going to be about the royal sunflower seed. I already had that written down. And I just flipped my Bible right after that. And I open up to this. I open up to Haggai 2, and this is the first thing my eyes see. It says, the word of the Lord came to Haggai, on the prophet, on the 24th day of the 9th month. Anybody catch that? Okay, for those who haven't picked up on it yet, today is the 24th day of the 9th month. Now, our boy Haggai operated on a different calendar, okay? So this isn't actually September 24th. It's like December. It's winter time because they're on a lunar calendar. But the point is, in my Bible, it says the 24th day of the 9th month. And you know what? God can use his word to speak to us in all kinds of creative, crazy ways. So that wasn't even the best part. The best part is what comes after that. I think you might want to pay attention on this 24th day of the 9th month. Okay? So let's talk about this real quick, all right? Haggai is addressing the people, and he's telling them it is time to build the temple. He says the temple's in ruins. It's time to build the temple. What is the temple? The temple is the church. The temple is the sunflower. Okay? Different analogy, same reality. It's time to build the temple. He said, my temple's lying in ruins, and all of you are so consumed by your own lives. And you're so consumed by what's right in front of your own household, while my temple lies in ruins. And he says it's time to build the church. It's time to engage with the work of the kingdom, which is the work of love. It's time to get out of your own sphere and come into the sphere of the kingdom, or I'll say it this way for us. It's time to bring our sphere, to bring our families, to bring our stuff into the church, because it's all connected. It's all family. And to get out of our own stuff, our own worries, and to think beyond ourselves and love an addict, or love a broken person, love a divorced person, I don't know, whatever. And he says to them, when you do this, when you step into this, blessing is going to overtake you like you cannot imagine. And then he gives this word, okay? Now, the foundation of the temple was laid. This is beautiful, okay? Because the foundation is like the seed of the sunflower. It's just the same image. You don't actually see the foundation. You see what grows on top of it. So a foundation has been laid. And he says this later on in the chapter. Do consider from this day onward, from the 24th day of the 9th month, from the day when the temple of the Lord was founded, or the foundation was laid. Consider this. Is the seed still in the barn? Now remember, this was really spoken in wintertime. So the seed was in the barn. But he says, so the vine, which is where wine comes from, The vine, the fig tree, the pomegranate, and the olive tree has not borne fruit. And if you read earlier in the chapter, it's saying you planted in past seasons, but you experienced lack. You didn't experience harvest. You didn't experience the overflow of my promises. And still, it has not borne fruit. The seed is in the barn. Yet, from this day onward, I will bless you. He's saying everything's about to change. Everything is about to change. You are about to enter into harvest. You are about to experience the blessings of God on your life like you've never encountered before. Because here's where it's rooted to, you are becoming, because this is your true identity, you are becoming a blessing to the nations. So about 3 weeks ago, Roland sends me and the leadership team a word from 20 years ago, 1997, that he found in his Bible. And the word was from the book of Isaiah. It was based on Isaiah's word about true fasting. Has anybody read the chapter about true fasting? It's not about fasting food. God says to the people of Israel, you're busy fasting, you're busy doing your religious ceremonies, you're busy doing all this stuff, and yet you're not experiencing overflow in your life. So he says in Isaiah 58, if you will give yourself to the hungry, if you will give yourself to the broken, to the poor, to the naked, to the afflicted, your light will break through like the dawn. Blessing will overtake you. So this promise here is based upon us being the blessing that we already are.